Hello, everyone. You are listening to the C Squared podcast with Corey and Curtis. Today, we are here with Brad Sanders. He works for a lot of different metal publications. He works for Decibel, he works for Bandcamp, and he's here to impart some knowledge of his onto all of us. So it shall be a great learning experience. But first, I just want to say thank you for joining us today. We are really happy to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Oh yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. It usually is. I will warn you, there's always some sort of shenanigans and or tomfoolery from Curtis and I. I'm not the most professional person, but you know what? It's okay. So for people who may not be familiar with like your show on Bandcamp and your work with the publications, why don't you just give everybody kind of a breakdown of who you are, what you do, your history and working with the genre, and what you're working on now?
Sure. So my current primary role with Bandcamp is I write the monthly metal column, and I host a bi-weekly metal radio show where I interview a different guest and play a bunch of new music, new and old music from the site. So Bandcamp, in case people aren't aware, is a digital music platform that is a very artist-friendly alternative to streaming services. Where a lot of the coin ends up in the artist's pocket. So they launched an editorial arm in 2016, and I started with them right when they launched in June of 2016. So I've been doing the metal column for about 5 years, and I've been doing the radio show for about 8 months, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. So how did you kind of get started in metal journalism then?
Well, I like to say that I started unofficially when I was 12 years old on message boards because, back in, I guess, 2002, when I was first getting into metal, that was kind of where the conversation was happening, was on message boards. And I would, obsess over records and write about them on there. And I ended up starting in earnest as a freelance writer, as something that was a part of what I wanted to do about 10 years ago. The first publication that I interned for was The Quietus in London in the summer of 2011. And I've pretty consistently been writing about metal for somebody ever since.
So I got a follow-up question on that. So if you basically started with The Quietus, how does one go from being fresh as a writer to going, that's a pretty A-level publication. How did you get into that right off the bat? Most people start small.
I'll say in 2011, they were not huge. It was pretty, so I was there as a part of, I was in college at the time, and I was in London for a kind of study abroad thing, but we had to have an internship while we were there. And The Quietus at the time was 2 editors in a shared flat where people lived just sitting at their computers and running this website. And I was their first ever intern, and there was no real grandeur to it. They just sort of handed me a giant, at the time it was CD promos. Those don't happen as often anymore, but they handed me a giant bag of CD promos and said, go through this and review whatever you want. So it was a very freeing, for a first, as you say, a first gig. They gave me a lot of leash. So I thought that was really cool and kind of set me on my way.
So, okay, just one more on that then. So once you got with The Quietus, how did you kind of get into the rest of the gigs that you got?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a small industry, as you guys know. And once you kind of know a few people, that kind of snowballs. I think Invisible Oranges was the next place that I was really, really heavily involved. This was back when Aaron LaRiviere was the editor. And I guess we knew each other a little bit from Twitter, or Twitter might not have been around yet. I don't know how we knew each other, but we knew each other a little bit. And he asked me to write for Invisible Oranges. So I did that for 3 or 4 years. And through that, I met a lot of people. And then, as you know, it just kind of snowballs from there. So Aaron wound up being a part of the metal crew at Stereo Gum. So I started doing stuff for Stereo Gum in 2014. And then I started writing for my current editor at Bandcamp, used to be at eMusic, and I would do stuff for eMusic. And then he went to this site that's now defunct called Wondering Sound, and I was doing stuff for him there. And then he went to Bandcamp, and I started doing stuff for him there. And, so it's a combination of just getting to know people and staying, on top of your social networks. And then also you can just blind email people sometimes. Like the way I got set up with Decibel is I just like emailed Albert Mudrian, who's the editor in chief there, and was like, hey, if you ever have any work, I'm around. So no, nothing really crazy, just, being available, being around, and talking to folks.
Cool. Corey, you got a follow up on that before the next one?
Not a follow up on that. I think that's a good history. But I did want to transition into your show on Bandcamp. I just actually found it not that long ago, and I was like, oh, we need to have this guy on the podcast because it's awesome. I really dig it. So how do you find the bands that you're going to feature? Are you like assigned them, or do you generally go with like, I mean, I know you did, it was Cannibal Corpse. And so do you go with which bands are big right now, or do you also feature, I mean, like, do you pick or does somebody else pick? I guess. There we go.
Yeah, I pick. Yeah, I totally have autonomy. It's actually a very cool setup because my main producer or editor, whoever you want to call him, the guy who kind of runs the radio program at Bandcamp, is not a metalhead, and trust me. So no one tells me what to do. And as far as how do I decide, like I like to do a good balance. So like there was the Corpse Grinder episode, obviously that was big, he's kind of like a metal celebrity or whatever. And I've done like Jonas Rinksey from Catatonia and Matt Harvey from Exhumed, some like bigger names. But then one thing I like to do, and what I think is great about Bandcamp, and I'm sure we'll get into this a little bit, is, bands who have essentially no footprint outside, they don't have a publicist or a label or anybody like looking after them. They just like put their shit up on Bandcamp. And part of my job is to be very curious and listen to as much as I can and discover stuff that isn't reaching as many folks, and then giving those bands a platform or an audience. So I'm very proud to have interviewed a number of artists on the show who have no like, industry support system whatsoever, but who are making great stuff.
Oh, that's awesome. And so do you tend to favor people who have like in either new or an upcoming release, or do you also feature people who have maybe been around for like a year, but you just really dig their music?
I try to keep it pretty current. I try to stick to the release schedule as best as I can. Sometimes stuff will be off by a month, say a record will come out and it'll take me a month to catch up to it, and then I'll interview the artist. But I tend to do artists who have something to promote.
Okay.
Just as a follow-up before Corey asks hers, so how do you normally get pitches from Publicists then, or is it mainly like you're just kind of like looking through the Bandcamp stuff?
Both. I do get a lot of pitches from Publicists, and there's a lot of publicists who I have long relationships with, but I'd say it's like 50-50 between stuff that people send to me and stuff that I find on my own.
And I guess just before giving it back to Corey again, so how much does the PR more influence you than just your own personal stuff, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I have really good relationships with a number of publicists whom I love, but I like to think that I am only covering stuff if I really think it's worthy of coverage, and I'm not bought. But it influences it to the extent of sometimes they put stuff in front of me that I wouldn't have found otherwise. And I'm always stoked to discover stuff through someone recommending it. But yeah, there's no real difference. Like I would say to an artist out there, do you need to hire a publicist to make sure that Brad Sanders hears your record? No, you don't.
Well, that's why I was kind of curious, because I mean, Bandcamp to me always seems like more of like an underground type thing where you do a discovery versus you get pitched. You know what I mean? So that's why I was kind of.
Yeah, totally. And that's definitely what's great about it. But at the same time, there's huge stuff on there too. Metal Blade and Nuclear Blast and Peaceful, they have stuff up on Bandcamp. So like, yeah, I didn't reinvent the wheel when I like discovered Dark Throne, but they're on there.
No, definitely not. Corey, I think I cut you off before.
No, that actually is a nice segue into the next topic of pitches themselves. I mean, you probably get them on multiple levels because you also work for the publications as well as Bandcamps. What are some of the the do's and don'ts of pitching Brad Sanders? So like, what are the things that you like to see versus, oh God, please never send me this?
I will never say, "Dear God, never send me this," unless you're going to be aggressive. If you're going to like get in my Twitter DMs and be really nasty to me, please don't do that. But
Cover my band or I'll come to your house. No, don't do that.
Awesome.
I haven't seen too much of that, but I consider anything that's sent my way. So I wouldn't say there's any definite don'ts, but some do's are just like, if you are a person to me and like, I'm clearly not just one of 10,000 people that you sent this email to with the exact same formatting and text, there's probably a better chance that I'm going to feel obligated to reply in some way. So I always enjoy people like, this is true of bands who don't have labels and publicists. Sometimes a band will just be a fan of the show and I'll get an email out of the blue from them and they'll say, "Hey man, I really dig the show. Here's something that I'd like you to consider playing on it." And I've played stuff from emails like that countless times. So just, be a person. And like, I realize that we're engaged in like something where each party wants something out of the other party, but it's so much more pleasant if you just kind of have a conversation.
Yeah, it's definite. And I mean, I don't know if you get this a whole lot, but do you get like a ton of false flattery that just feels scummy in some of your pitches? Because I get that especially if people are pitching me via like Facebook or Twitter. I just get the like weirdo, "You're stunning, feature my band," or like, "You're so amazing, feature my band." And it's like, dude, you're being creepy about it.
Yeah. No, I don't have any fans like that, I guess. No.
Or
I
like
did
people
delete.
that just say you're the greatest writer in the world, or your show is the greatest thing ever, and they sleep to it every night. Or
Yeah, people who probably haven't actually read anything I wrote, but are
Yeah.
like, "Damn, you're such a good writer." Yeah, you get a bit of that. I will say I deleted Facebook about 3 months ago, just like walked away from it for good, and
Nice.
that's
a
where
lot
the
of people
worst.
are doing that.
That's
Yeah.
where the worst of that self promo lives. Like honestly, on Twitter or Instagram or my email, I don't get that level of weirdness. But yeah, the other inbox or whatever it's called on Facebook for people who you
The
have friends
requests
with, the
inbox.
requests. Yeah, there was some darkness in there.
Yeah, that's where mine all like, because I mean, for the most part on like Twitter and Instagram, you're right. Most people are nice. They're polite. They're just like, "Hey, I don't know where to find your emails, so this is what I'm using."
Yeah, that's fine.
And that's one thing. But yeah, they definitely get weird on Facebook sometimes and just like super over the top.
So
Totally.
Brad, let's kind of devolve a little bit into
Devolve.
some shenanigans. And so what is the worst pitches you've ever personally received without naming names, unless you really want to name names?
Oh, the worst.
The worst. Like, let's devolve into like absolute stupidity of pitches that you've seen.
That's tough. I bet it's not like a metal band. I bet it's like some PR list that I somehow wound up on that
Sure.
exclusively talks about like ex-members of Buck Cherry's solo albums or something. I get some of the worst, like, post-grunge
Nice.
radio rock shit. Like, you'd be surprised how many like members of Stained and Drowning Pool just like clearly have flourishing careers these days.
That's insane. I had no idea about that. So like, what is it? It's just like, featuring ex-members of frickin' rock band?
There's definitely some like labels and PR lists, and I won't name names because I don't even know their names. But like, there is a circuit still for like people who were a little famous for playing heavy music 20 years ago who are still out there, and more power to them. Somebody wants that, I guess, but I'm never gonna cover like, washed up hair metal guy releases solo album. That's not in my beat.
No.
The ex-guitarist of Cinderella did a solo album, and he's now wants to pitch you type thing. Okay, well, what else from non-PRs? What is the worst non-PR pitch you've ever received?
Nothing comes to mind. Honestly, people are fairly respectful. I mean, sometimes you get the cultural difference thing where maybe like an Eastern European band might not quite know the niceties of how to talk to a journalist, and so you'll get something like way too blunt, like cover this.
Yeah.
But I always chalk that up to probably.
You can always
like
kind of tell those though,
Yeah.
when it's a language issue versus a this person's a douche kind of issue. You can always kind of tell.
For sure.
Curious though, have you ever had it where, I know Corey's had, well, I think Corey's had this, I don't think he's ever actually said, where the band gets mad at you if you won't cover them?
I've had that.
Yeah, I thought you had.
Probably. Yeah, most likely. And I always try to diffuse it because I just tell people I get 8 slots a month. My metal column is the eight best albums of the month. And 25 metal albums come out a week that I consider. So by the stats alone, there's just not that much stuff I can cover. You know, and I think people understand that. Now, if I was more of a like blogger who was doing like a lot of track premieres or something like that, I could see it being like, come on, dude, just cover this. But there's like an actual cap on how much I can cover for Bandcamp, right? So I think people are usually fairly understanding about that.
Yeah, the people with me, they're not understanding because I don't really have a cap other than my own time schedule, because I'm working for Metal Injection and I'm doing just like a bunch of different things, and it's not the same as the Bandcamp thing. But yeah, I've definitely had bands get super salty with me and then just kind of retort with, fine, how much is it going to cost for me to get you to cover my band? I'm like, that does not work at all. I've had 2 bands do that. How much is it going to cost? It's going to cost whatever your production is going to cost, because that's where you need to improve for me to cover you.
Yeah, like, that's depressing. They must have some reason that they think that would work. Like there must be blogs out there that are taking payola, right?
Yeah, there's definitely, not probably, but there is definitely people out there that's the way it works. It just does not work with me and my publication.
It's a European thing again, because there's European magazines, specifically print magazines, where it's not pay to play, but it's pay to play, wink, wink type thing, you know?
Yeah, I've gone through that. Yeah. I worked at a record label for 8 years and only recently left. And the thing with the European magazines is like, we love the record, we want to review it, we're going to give it an 8 out of 10. But it's €150 to get a track on the cover mount CD. And if you don't put a track on the CD, then we're not going to have room for the review.
Or they make it sound like they don't. Sometimes they're not even that blunt. It's like, it's it's 150 for the review, and we're trying to see if we can fit it in because there's all these other albums as well that we have on the docket too. And you're like, fuck off.
Or in the case of what happened with me not that long ago when I was with the band that I work with, that it was like 3 emails deep. They were like, they emailed me, hey, can you send us a promo picture? And then they emailed back, we're going to do a review, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, oh, thank you. Okay, now here's our rates. It was like 3 emails deep that they finally dropped that on me. And it's like, really, guys? Really?
Yep. It's fucking crazy. So, okay. So before we move on, we got to talk about pitching dues more.
Yeah,
more
the best pitches you've ever gotten.
Well, just get to that. Just hold on. We got to, how do you prefer to receive a pitch? Let's start with there.
Email, and I'll say my email on the airwaves. It's bradscottsand@gmail.com. Please email me, because Twitter and Instagram DMs are great, but I'll lose track of them. It doesn't live somewhere that I look on a regular basis, and so I forget. And email, at least you're guaranteeing that I'm going to see it. So definitely send me an email if you're trying to pitch me.
Fair. Okay. And what do you like to see in the pitch, other than because one thing I've received, and Corey's received this, well, I'm sure you have, can you check out my band? And then there's no link, no nothing. Would you be interested in possibly checking out my band? Let me know, type of thing. So what do you want to see when you get a pitch from a band?
For me specifically, a Bandcamp link, because if you have a record that you're promoting that you're really excited about and it's really good, but it's only going to be on Spotify, I really can't do anything with it. I can't cover it for Bandcamp. So a Bandcamp link, and I like anybody who kind of condenses, we all get one sheets and we all get artist bios in our inbox every day. Like if you can condense why I should care about it into like a 2-sentence pitch, that helps me a lot. Because if I'm interested in those 2 sentences, then I'll go down and I'll read everything else, right? But hook me in with a brief description, give me a Bandcamp link, and there's 100% chance I'll at least take a listen.
I have a question. I have a question.
Okay.
So I'm in a band and I got a Bandcamp link, but the album is not to be released for another 30 days because I want to be current. How do I get you to check out my album if I only have 1 or 2 tracks streamable?
Yeah. Well, if you're comfortable doing so, send me the full album as a download.
Cool.
You know, I download promos. You know, if you have Holix or Promo Jukebox or one of those, that's great. But if it's just a Google Drive folder, because that's where you have it, that's great too.
Okay.
And I download music all the time.
So just to finish clarifying on that before we move on. So when someone pitches you for Bandcamp, if they want to be reviewed, include the full album plus the Bandcamp link, correct?
Yep, exactly.
Just for clarification. Sorry, Corey, go ahead.
Oh, no, that's totally fine. I've completely forgotten my question.
Dues. It was due pitching dues.
No, like I said, I completely forgot what I was going to ask about pitching dues.
Sorry.
Actually, what if somebody sent you like a Bandcamp code to download the album? Is that also acceptable? One of the little codes?
Yeah, that's fun. That's fun. And that's smart if you're a band who likes to work the margins a little bit, because if I download it via Bandcamp through their code redemption, then it shows up in my collection. And I have a lot of people who follow me on Bandcamp and follow my collection. And so you're going to get people seeing it there as well. So that's actually like kind of a shrewd move.
Yes. I thought it might be a good move. No, go for it.
Well,
I won't step on you, Curtis.
Well, no. I wanted you to ask a question next, but I had a thought about the collection thing. So just out of curiosity on the collection thing. So how do I want to phrase this? I don't know how I was going to phrase this. Now I've just completely lost track of my own question. I'm sorry, Brad. Let's go back on. Corey, was there another one you wanted to say before I butted in and forgot my own question?
Nope. Go ahead, butt in. You do you.
We've all devolved already. So like, so now, what is the best type of pitch that you've seen to date that will get your attention?
Oh, that was the question that I asked earlier. So I'm counting that as my question.
It is your question. That's why I brought it back. I was trying to hint at you, but.
Man, you know, I can tell when people reach out to me who know my taste a little bit, and who pitch me something based on something they know I dig. So if you saw that I, named the Catatonia album the album of the year last year, and then you email me about your depressive doom rock band and say, this kind of sounds like Catatonia, I'm going to listen to that right away. So I can't pretend that every publicist and every band needs to like read my work extensively or anything like that. I wouldn't pretend to have that kind of ego. But if you have some familiarity with what I like and you pitch it to me in terms of that, that goes a long way.
Well, okay. So like, let's say you're in a band. How would you kind of frame it? You would just be like, you've reviewed this in the past. We think we're in the same style type thing,
hey, I saw that you wrote a guide to dissonant death metal. I'm in a dissonant death metal band. This happens all the time, actually, where bands see something that I did for Bandcamp that, like, say I wrote about the new wave of American true heavy metal, and then a band who's in that movement who I didn't write about is like, hey, I liked your article. I like a lot of those bands. We actually have a new record coming out. You want to check it out? And I've discovered a lot of cool bands that way. So yeah, put it in terms of stuff that I cover. There's certain stuff that I don't particularly cover too, just because my own coverage is kind of guided by my own taste. But like, as an antithesis to what I'm saying, if you send me something in the subject line is just like genty deathcore, I'm probably going to be like, yeah, I might just delete that, just because I don't happen to cover that. Nothing against it, but that's just not really in the realm of my taste. So, trying to meet me where I'm at is definitely helpful.
Corey, what are your thoughts on that?
No, that's actually something that I really respect about there's a PR that he emails me. He's one of the few that is allowed to email me on my personal inbox instead of my Metal Injection one, but he pays attention to what I like. And he gets a lot more coverage from me that way, because he's not sending me like, I don't know, some weird dissonant, raw black metal because that's not my jam. But he
Yes.
knows what I do like. So
They should send that to me, by the way. Send that to me if you work with raw dissonant black metal. I'll take it.
I will send you all of my raw dissonant black metal, and you send me all of your like folk metal or like melodic death metal. That's my
Okay.
jam. And if you
Yeah.
don't do folk metal or melodic death metal,
Oh, I do. I dip in, but you probably do more than me.
yeah. If it's got an accordion or like a face melting flute solo, I will be all over that.
I'll name a name only because we had a funny conversation about it. Well, I won't name the name of the publicist, but I'll name the band. Someone sent me the new Corpiclani when it came
I
out,
love Corpiclani so
and I was
much.
like, dude, I love you, but this ain't for me.
Oh, send it to me. I love them so much. That is easily the most fun mosh pit I have ever been in my entire life. They are gems, and I cannot say enough good things about Corpiclani. I'm a huge fan. So everybody, if you're listening and you're a publicist who is representing Corpiclani, send it to me.
Well, I'll find that email. I'll forward it.
After we get off the call, you can ask him who's repping Corpiclani, and
we'll cover that all day, every day.
So back to the pitching for a brief second here. So before we move on, now that we've devolved into folk metal and stuff like that.
Hey,
so
Corpiclani is not a devolvement. That is an evolution in this conversation.
I'm not going to insult them. I just said they're not quite my thing.
Okay, so moving right along here. So Brad, so now how does one kind of pitch you on the different places? Because you said you write for Pitchfork and Decibel in addition to Bandcamp. When someone's pitching you, should they be specific, the exact place they want to be covered, or how does this work here?
Well, I have a tremendous amount of power over what I cover at Bandcamp and almost no power over what I cover at the other places. So, the Decibel stuff comes through their lens of what their coverage is and what they want it to be. And the Pitchfork stuff, I mean, I'll pitch Pitchfork on anything, but if you have a sense of what Pitchfork typically covers and you're in a band that probably isn't going to get reviewed on Pitchfork, then talk to me about Bandcamp instead.
Okay, can you clearly define, because I've had clients that want to get in Pitchfork, and 99.9% of the time they're not right for Pitchfork, and I would never pitch anything for them for Pitchfork. What type of metal band would be a Pitchfork band, just so it's spelled out clearly for anybody that's listening here?
It's confusing now, I think, because they used to have people in leadership positions who were metalheads, and they don't really anymore. So it's a little different now. I mean, I think as a general rule of thumb, a metal band who a non-metalhead could get into without much context is probably. Say again?
Can you define that exactly? Is there a possibility? Because I think I know, but I want to hear someone from Pitchfork say it.
Yeah. I think if you need to have done like 10 years of homework on power metal to understand what your band is doing, then you probably aren't a good fit for Pitchfork. But if someone who likes Joy Division might hear your record and find something to like in it, even though they don't really know metal, then you're probably a better fit for Pitchfork.
Fair. So the metalcore, groovecore band is probably not going to be a good fit at Pitchfork. Just spell it out.
No, unless, well, it's kind of doubling back on itself. I'm seeing so many bands in my pitches now who like cite Linkin Park and Slipknot as influences, and I'm like kind of blown away by that because I thought that was going to stay like unfashionable forever. But it's I feel like it's coming back around a little bit. But yeah, in general, look at the kind of stuff that Pitchfork covers, and if you can imagine a fan of that stuff liking your band, then it might be a good fit. But if not, then it's probably not going to happen.
Fair. Because one thing I do want to kind of bring up is, can you kind of talk about for a brief second, I think, and I want Corey to talk about this too after, is when someone is pitching you, like why it's important for a band of the right genre to be going after you, and why it doesn't make sense for, like, for example, a hair metal band to be pitching you. Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah,
I think so. I mean, there's stuff that I personally like that I probably won't write about. Like you mentioned Cinderella before as a joke, but I like Cinderella. I
like Cinderella too.
I love them.
I absolutely love Long Cold Winter and Night Songs, but I don't have anywhere to put those feelings in a publication. So you're right. Yeah, if like Tom Kiefer has a solo album, I probably can't cover it. But in general, I think about audience to a certain extent. Yes, it's dictated by my own taste and by what I dig, but I also know that there's like a Bandcamp user, who comes to the site looking to kind of be shown something that they're gonna enjoy, and I think that my personal taste does kind of align really neatly with who that Bandcamp user is, and so it's not that hard for me to write about stuff that I think they might dig. But yeah, there's no hard and fast rules. I mean, in my last column, I covered a band called Sinistar, which is they were high school kids who made a demo tape in the 80s and then thought it was lost in a house fire, and then found it last year and remastered it and put it out as a debut album 35 years after it was recorded, right? Cool story. And it's like hard rock, like kind of hair metal adjacent hard rock, but I thought it had a cool story and I thought the songs were good, and so I wrote about it. So like there's no
looking for this.
The record's called Killers on the Run, and it's very like naive, and it sounds like high school kids. Like there's like lyrics about not listening to your teachers.
This art is fantastic too.
Yeah, it's wonderful. So I use that record as an example of there is no like true line in the sand of what I will or will not cover. Yes, there's a sweet spot, but if something is cool, I'm open to writing about it.
I am totally going to be buying this after we get off the call, just because it looks amazing. So, Corey, what are your thoughts on this, on the right genre to pitch you, if you get what I mean?
So the thing with me is I don't want to write something where you can tell that I am not into or I'm not passionate about whatever it is that I'm writing about. I mean, there's a lot of good music that is just not my jam, just like with, you, Brad, and Korpiklani, not your jam, totally my jam. I don't want to do a disservice to that band by writing something that's just like, oh, here's the new Korpiklani song or whatever,
I agree.
Because I feel like that's more harmful than it is helpful.
Yeah.
Even if it is a, footprint on a major website, it's just like you can tell when somebody's not excited about what it is that they're writing about. So that's why it, to me, is important to pay attention to the genres when you're pitching somebody, because you want to get somebody who's going to write about it in a way that entices other people to go check out your music or to go buy your music. And somebody who's not into raw dissonant black metal is not going to, they're going to be like, here you go. Not, this record is awesome, you should check this out. It's going to be meh. And it's going to be blatantly obvious. So that's why I tend to think that it's, important to pay attention to genres. Is I don't want to hurt the band because I just didn't like their music, because it's not fair to them.
Yep.
Yeah. I agree with that.
But Brad can't really, like your column on Bandcamp, you don't do bands that suck because you're trying to get people to go to Bandcamp and buy, right?
Yeah,
right?
there is an interesting kind of I don't know yes, in short, you're right. The idea of my column is that you're going to find stuff that you want to buy on Bandcamp, and I'm not paid on a commission basis or anything like that. It's not a direct one-to-one of like, I only write about things if I think it'll move units. Like that's not true at all, but there is that kind of underlying factor to it. And so part of what we do on Bandcamp, and this is partly about that financial imperative, but I think it's more about our like attitude towards criticism, is we don't pan anything. If there's better things we can do with our limited column inches than shit on a band who's just trying to like, make it. So there's a place for negative criticism, absolutely, and we all are entertained when we read some of it, I'm sure. But it's just not what I do.
No,
I don't like to do it either. You can tell that a band has worked really hard, and even though it's not quite there because they couldn't afford the right production or anything like that, but that they worked hard, I don't like just shitting on it. It doesn't feel right to me.
Yeah, it's easy enough to just not cover it,
Exactly.
That's me not
lying.
And
I try to give those bands a couple of pointers too, like, hey, I can't cover this right now, but here's some areas where you can improve on, bring your vocals forward in the mix or do this, that, or the other thing so that they can learn something from it and get something out of reaching out to me. Still, it's like, I'll try to help you in the ways that I can, so that you can get coverage next time.
Yeah. So one more question, Brad, because we got to wrap up pretty quickly here. But so do you ever, I don't know how I want to phrase this, because I think you kind of answered this, but I just kind of want to get a clear answer. Do you ever kind of consider at any time about the fact, like, the band's commercial appeal on your column prior to writing, just to make sure you still get the traffic, if you get what I mean? I'm not trying to say you do, but I'm asking if it ever comes up where you have to kind of have more of a mainstream band in there just to make sure you still get the clicks, I guess.
The answer is no. Honestly, like, my column does fairly consistent traffic regardless of what's covered in it. I think
Fair.
The fact that it's a metal article on Bandcamp is what's getting the clicks, not necessarily who it covers. And with my show, to bring it back around to that, I've seen very much the same thing. I did that Corpse Grinder interview, and I did a whole Cannibal Corpse special. I had George like guest curate a portion of it, and I was like, this is going to be like the biggest show I ever did, and it did fine. But when I talked to, I did an interview with Victory Over the Sun, which is a microtonal black metal project, super underground, no label, no PR, nothing. I did that interview, and that came out Friday, and those numbers like blew me away. It was the most successful, at least on socials, it was the most successful any episode of my show has been. So just to show you, like, Cannibal Corpse might be stars like in the big fishbowl of the world, but Bandcamp is like a specific audience, and it doesn't necessarily track with what you'd expect from the wider world of metal.
That's interesting. Corey, do we have anything else? We don't have much time left, but if you got any other questions?
No, I think I'm good. And we've, dropped a lot of knowledge on people that they'll need to process. So,
So, Brad, we're going to probably invite you back again in another month or two if possible, because there is more that we do want to cover, but we just don't have the time.
Part 2. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, part
Do
2.
Part 2.
So with that, we're ending off. Party on, Corey.
Party on, Curtis. Party on, Brad.
Party on, guys.